Sonnet 95, Summary. Employing a paternal attitude, the poet continues his lecture on how deceiving appearances can be. In the first quatrain, he constructs a simile in which the young man is like a fragrant rose, in which vice, likened to a destructive worm, grows unchecked. The poet doesn't condemn the young man, but instead seems almost joyful that the youth's beauty hides such vice. Oh, in what sweets dost thou thy sins enclose? In the second quatrain, the poet criticizes himself for making lascivious comments about the youth's younger days, and we come to understand that the shame in line 1 is actually the ill report that the poet makes of the young man. But merely to mention the youth's name, as the poet does, turns malice into a compliment about him. Naming thy name blesses an ill report. In the last quatrain, the poet again addresses the youth's ability to mask any vice in his character. This time, the poet likens the youth to a mansion, where beauty's veil doth cover every blot, and all things turns to fair that eyes can see. These lines' jubilant and almost proud tone is similar to that in the first quatrain. Because the youth is utterly beautiful and the poet is entirely unappealing, they are ill-matched for union in a single being. The poet knows he can expect little pleasure from the relationship, yet he hesitates to make the final, complete break. Essentially, he is the shame which, like a canker in the fragrant rose, doth spot the beauty of the youth's budding name. Knowing that the youth's behavior toward him is dishonorable because it is false, still the poet ingratiates himself to the young man. For example, in the final couplet he calls him dear heart, and his paternal affection for the youth prompts him to warn the young man, the hardest knife ill used doth lose his edge. In other words, the beauty that the youth uses to cover his faults will ultimately fail him. The more he tries to compensate for his inner vices by maintaining his outer appearance, the faster that beautiful exterior will fail. Ultimately, he will be exposed, not as an attractive man, but as a manipulating tease. Sonnet 94, Summary. On the surface at least, Sonnet 94 continues the theme from the previous sonnet, which contrasts virtue with appearance. Although the sonnet offers a warm testimonial to a cool and impassive youth, there is no specific mention of the poet or the young man in the entire poem. The they in the first line sums up the youth's characteristics. He is detached, impersonal, and authoritative. In the second quatrain, the they ironically pictures a youth who has a stingy, hoarding nature. The third quatrain, which seems at first to be disconnected from the first two, presents an image of a summer flower that is to the summer sweet, but that succumbs easily to base infection, meaning that in competition with more unsightly and noxious weeds, the summer flower will lose out. How this third quatrain is related to the first two is explained in the concluding couplet. For sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. Outward appearance does not necessarily correspond to an object's worth or character. The youth who in the first quatrain is detached and impersonal is really a tease. In the second quatrain, those persons who are the lords and owners of their faces are deceptive because they create false appearances. And finally, the summer flower may appear beautiful and vivacious, but it falters easily when faced with an obstacle such as the basest weed. The entire sonnet, then, is an extended metaphor highlighting the dichotomy between outward appearance, mere show, and inner worth, an object's or person's true nature. Much criticism has been written about Sonnet 94. According to one group of critics, Shakespeare advances the argument of those who, with an outward beauty that is the source of temptation, are themselves cold and not easily tempted. In contrast are those whose beauty not only tempts but also leads them into temptation. As a symbol of the first, the flower that is sweet to the world around it, although it blossoms and dies by itself, is self-contained. As a symbol of the second, the same flower is infected with a canker, in which case it is more offensive than a weed.